Rain drummed against Seoul's midnight streets as Kiana stumbled forward, one hand pressed to her temple where blood mixed with water. Every doorway she passed was locked, every window dark. "Your brother did this." The words had been forming in her mind for 3 blocks, half prayer, half threat. She'd rehearsed them while running, while bleeding, while making the most dangerous bet of her invisible life. The Park penthouse door stood before her, sleek, black, expensive. She raised her fist. 1 knock. 2. The door opened. Park Ji-Hoon didn't startle at the blood, didn't recoil at the mess on his threshold. His eyes moved from her face to her hands, to the defensive way she held herself, cataloging evidence with the precision of a man who'd seen violence in every form. She opened her mouth, forced the words past her swollen lip. "Your brother did this." Silence. Not the shocked kind, the calculating kind. His gaze held hers, cold, sharp, reading her like a contract he was deciding whether to sign. Behind him, the penthouse gleamed with minimalist wealth. Marble floors, razor-edge furniture, not a thing out of place. Everything she wasn't. Taehyun's head tilted fractionally. His hand moved to his phone. Kiana's breath caught. This was it. He'd call security. Or his brother. Or, "Can you walk?" His voice was quiet, controlled, deadly in its calm. She nodded. Inside. Not a question. A command that somehow felt like protection. He stepped back, giving her space to cross his threshold. As she passed, she felt his presence. Solid, inevitable. A man who'd already made his decision without asking a single question. The door clicked shut behind her. "Sit," he said. "Don't move." When he returned with medical supplies, his movements were efficient, clinical. He knelt before her, tilting her chin toward the light with 2 fingers. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. His jaw tightened, the only sign of emotion. "What did you see?" he asked, already cleaning her wound with hands steadier than her heartbeat. And Kiana realized, he wasn't asking if she was telling the truth. He was asking what truth was about to destroy his family. Kiana Locke had survived 28 years by being the person no one noticed. In Seoul's elite households, invisibility was currency. Maids who saw too much didn't get second chances. The Park estate hadn't been her first job, but it was supposed to be her safest. A good family, Kira had promised. Old money, respectable. Except Park Ji-Hoon, the younger brother, the reckless one, didn't live by respectable rules. And Kiana had been in the wrong hallway at the wrong time, carrying fresh towels when she should have been blind. The guest bathroom was all black marble and chrome, clinical as an operating room. Kiana sat on the edge of the bathtub while Taehyun worked in silence, his fingers steady against her temple. She should have felt afraid. A bleeding stranger in a crime lord's penthouse, letting him touch her face with hands that had probably ordered worse than what his brother had done. But fear required energy she didn't have left. "Look up," he said. She obeyed. The bathroom light caught the sharp planes of his face, the concentration in his eyes as he cleaned the wound above her brow. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and restrained, like everything else about him. The antiseptic stung. She flinched. "Hold still." His thumb pressed gently against her cheekbone, steadying her. The gesture was impersonal, efficient. A man solving a problem, not comforting a victim. Somehow that made it easier to breathe. "It's not deep," he said finally, applying a butterfly bandage with surgeon's precision. "Head wounds bleed more than they damage." Kiana didn't respond, couldn't. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving her hollow. Taehyun moved to her shoulder, easing the blood-soaked fabric aside to examine the bruising beneath. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. His movements slowed. "He used his fists," Taehyun observed. "Not a question." "Yes." "Rings?" She nodded. She could still feel where the metal had split skin, his hand stilled against her shoulder. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he didn't move. Then he resumed his work, wrapping gauze with the same controlled precision. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll discuss what happens next." "I don't." Her voice cracked. "I don't have anywhere else to go." "I know." He secured the gauze, his fingers brushing the hollow of her collarbone. "That's why you came here instead of the police." Smart man, dangerous man. He stood, gathering the bloodied supplies, his suit still immaculate despite kneeling on bathroom tile to tend her wounds. At the doorway, he paused. "The bedroom is through there. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer." His eyes met hers in the mirror's reflection. But understand, if I wanted to hurt you, a lock wouldn't stop me. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt oddly like honesty. Why are you helping me? The question escaped before she could stop it. Taehyun's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, or perhaps recognition. Because you were right to come here. He turned to leave, then stopped. And because my brother needs to learn that actions have consequences. The door closed with a whisper of expensive hinges. Kiana sat alone in the marble sanctuary, touching the bandage on her temple. Her reflection stared back, still bloody, still broken, but no longer running. She'd crossed his threshold. Now she existed in the space between protection and possession. And Park Ji-Hoon had just declared her worth more than family loyalty. Kiana woke to voices. Not shouting. Worse. The kind of controlled conversation that happened between men who'd learned early that volume was for amateurs. She sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. Dawn light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting Taehyun's guest room in shades of gray. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the mattress firm enough to feel expensive. Everything designed for function, not comfort. The voices grew clearer. One of them was laughing. Her blood went cold. She knew that laugh. Kiana moved to the door, on instinct, pressing her ear against the wood. The lock was still engaged. She'd taken Taehyun's advice, though she suspected he was right about its uselessness. Overreacted, obviously. Ji-Hoon's voice carried the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. You know how these girls are. Dramatic. She probably went crying to whatever boyfriend. What exactly happened? Taehyun's voice cut through like a blade through silk. A pause. Then Ji-Hoon laughed again, that boyish, careless sound that made Kiana's hands shake. She saw something she shouldn't have. The shipment last night? I was handling it personally, and she just wandered into the wrong room. His tone shifted, defensive now. What was I supposed to do? Let her run to the police? To your competitors? So you beat her. I handled it. Ji-Hoon's footsteps echoed on marble, pacing. She's nobody, hun. A maid, replaceable. I made sure she understood what happens when people see too much. Silence stretched between them. Kiana held her breath. Where is she now? Taehyun asked. How should I know? Probably in some clinic or bleeding out in an alley. Does it matter? Ji-Hoon sighed, exasperated. I called because I knew you'd hear about it eventually. The family doesn't need this right now. Not with the Lee negotiation coming up. I'll make it go away. I always do. You always do, Taehyun repeated, flat. Exactly, so stop looking at me like... Ji-Hoon stopped. You're not seriously mad about this. She was staff, collateral. You taught me that witnesses are liabilities. I taught you that unnecessary violence draws attention. It wasn't unnecessary. You called her nobody 3 times in 2 minutes. Taehyun's voice dropped lower. People who are nobody don't require explanations. Yet here you are, explaining. Another pause, longer this time. What are you saying? Ji-Hoon's laugh had lost its edge. I'm saying you're worried, which means you hit her hard enough to leave evidence, but not hard enough to ensure silence. She won't talk. Where would she even go? Through the door, Kiana heard footsteps approaching. She backed away silently, heart hammering against her ribs. Perhaps nowhere, Taehyun said. Or perhaps somewhere you should have considered before you used your fists. Gang? Go home, Ji-Hoon, I'll handle this. You'll handle? What does that mean? The guest room door was 3 meters from where they stood. Kiana could feel the weight of proximity, of being the secret between brothers. It means, Taehyun said quietly, that you've made this my problem now. Ji-Hoon left 20 minutes later. Kiana listened to his footsteps fade, the elevator chime, the silence that followed. She didn't move from where she'd pressed herself against the wall beside the door. He's gone. Taehyun's voice came from just outside. No knock, no warning. He'd known she was listening the entire time. Kiana opened the door slowly. He stood in the hallway, still wearing yesterday's shirt but with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Exhaustion lived in the fine lines around his eyes, though his posture remained impeccable. You heard, he said. Not a question. Every word. His gaze moved over her face, assessing the bruising that had bloomed purple overnight. How much pain? Manageable. That's not what I asked. Kiana's jaw tightened. Enough that I know I'm alive. Something flickered across his expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition of someone who understood that pain could be useful. "Come," he said, turning. "You need to eat." The kitchen was as minimalist as everything else. White counters, steel appliances, a single shelf of perfectly aligned containers. Taeyeon moved through it with practiced efficiency, pulling out rice, soup, banchan. Kiana sat at the counter and watched him work. It felt surreal, a mafia boss preparing breakfast like any other morning. "You're not calling the police," she said. "No. You're not sending me away." He set a bowl before her, steam rising between them. "No." "Then what am I?" Taeyeon leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The morning light caught the sharp line of his jaw, the calculating assessment in his dark eyes. "Protected," he said finally. "For now." "For now." Kiana's fingers tightened around the spoon. "And when now ends?" "That depends on what you saw, what you know." He tilted his head. "And what you're willing to become." The words settled between them like a contract unsigned. "I can't leave." Not a question. She already knew. "You can leave." His voice remained even, matter of fact. "The elevator works, the door unlocks from inside, but the moment you step outside this building, you become my brother's unfinished business." He paused. "Or my competitor's opportunity." Kiana looked around the penthouse. The expensive silence, the controlled perfection, the windows that showed all of Seoul but were too high to escape from. "This is a cage," she said quietly. "Yes." No apology in his tone, "but it's the cage that keeps you breathing." She wanted to argue, wanted to stand and prove she wasn't trapped. But they both knew the truth. She'd traded one kind of powerlessness for another. "How long?" she asked. "Until I decide what to do about my brother." Taeyeon moved to the window, hands in his pockets. "Until you decide if you trust me more than you fear him." "I don't trust you," he smiled then, cold and knowing. "Good, trust is expensive here, but survival?" He turned back to face her. "Survival is negotiable." Kiana lifted the spoon to her lips. The soup was perfect, warm, seasoned precisely, made by hands that controlled everything they touched. She was alive, fed, safe, and completely, utterly trapped. 3 days passed in the minimalist cage before Taeyeon appeared in the guest room doorway with a garment bag. "Get dressed," he said. "You're coming with me." Kiana looked up from the book she'd been pretending to read. "Where?" "A business meeting." He hung the bag on the door handle. "You wanted to understand how this world works. Now you'll see." The dress inside was black, simple, expensive, a uniform of a different kind, one that said possession without saying victim. She hated how well it fit. 20 minutes later, she sat in the back of Taehyun's car, watching Seoul's nightscape blur past tinted windows. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the penthouse, his attention fixed on his phone, fingers moving across the screen with surgical precision. The car stopped outside a restaurant she recognized, the kind where reservations required connections money couldn't buy. "Stay close," Taeyeon said as they exited. "Don't speak unless I tell you to." Inside, the private room held 4 men in expensive suits. They stood when Taeyeon entered, respect and fear moving across their faces in equal measure. All except one. He remained seated, confident, a man who thought he held cards worth playing. Mid-40s, soft around the edges, the kind of comfortable that came from years of skimming profits. "Park Ji," the man said, gesturing to the empty seats. "I wasn't expecting company." "Kim Sang-woo?" Taeyeon sat, and Kiana took the chair beside him, feeling the weight of eyes assessing, calculating. "Let's discuss the shipment discrepancy." Sang-woo's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A simple accounting error, already corrected?" "Interesting." Taeyeon's voice remained calm. "Because my accountant found 3 similar errors over the past 6 months, each conveniently in your favor." The temperature in the room dropped. "You're mistaken." Taeyeon placed a folder on the table, opened it. Inside, photographs, spreadsheets, bank statements, evidence laid out like an autopsy. "You've been stealing from me for 8 months, Taeyeon said quietly. 2 million won per shipment. Small enough to miss, large enough to matter. Sang-woo's face paled. "I can explain." "Can you?" Taeyeon leaned back, and Kiana felt the shift in his posture, from businessman to predator. "Because I've heard many explanations today. My brother explained why he beat a woman who saw too much. You're explaining why you stole from someone who forgets nothing." He tilted his head. "I'm tired of explanations that insult my intelligence." Silence, heavy, suffocating. "Park Ji, please. Your wife's name is Min Jung." Your daughter just started university. Taehyun's tone didn't change, but the threat landed like a blade. I know where they have coffee every Thursday. I know your son's kindergarten schedule. Sangwoo's hands shook. Don't. I'm not my brother, Taehyun said softly. I don't use fists when words suffice. But understand, you didn't just steal money, you stole my time, my trust. And those? His dark eyes held no mercy. Those are debts paid in blood or loyalty. Choose. Kiana watched, frozen, as the man crumbled. This was the iron strategist, not the one who'd cleaned her wounds or made her breakfast. This was the man his brother feared. They drove back in silence, Sangwoo's broken promises still echoing in Kiana's mind. The man had chosen loyalty, what little remained of it, and left with his family intact but his dignity shattered. She'd watched Taehyun dismantle him with nothing but words and evidence. No fists, no blood, just the quiet, surgical destruction of a man who'd forgotten consequences existed. You're thinking too loud, Taehyun said. Kiana turned from the window. You terrified him. Yes, without touching him. Violence is expensive. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. My brother never learned that lesson. The penthouse felt different when they returned, less like a cage, more like a fortress. Taehyun shed his jacket, loosened his tie, and poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. Drink, he said, handing her the glass. You've earned it. The whiskey burned. She welcomed it. Why did you bring me? She asked. Because you needed to understand what protection costs in this world. He sat across from her, shadows playing across his face. And because I needed you to see the difference between my brother's chaos and my control. Kiana set down her glass. You wanted me to choose you. I want you to choose survival. He stood, moving to a closet she hadn't noticed. Which means you stop being the woman who bleeds on doorsteps. He returned with boxes. 3 of them, each bearing the mark of designers whose names she'd only seen in magazines. What is this? A new uniform. Taehyun opened the first box, revealing silk blouses in jewel tones, emerald, sapphire, blood red. You came here in a maid's shirt, stained with violence. That woman was invisible, disposable. She doesn't exist anymore. Kiana stared at the clothes, her throat tight. I can't afford. You're not buying them. I am. He opened another box, tailored slacks, a blazer cut like armor. People in my world judge value by appearance. If you look like staff, they'll treat you as expendable. If you look like mine, his eyes met hers, they'll think twice before touching you. Mine. The words settled between them, heavy with implications neither acknowledged. I'm not your possession, Kiana said quietly. No. Taehyun's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. But while you're under my protection, you wear the uniform that keeps you safe. Consider it part of the negotiation. She lifted one of the silk shirts, ridiculously soft, impossibly expensive. Everything her maid's hands had once laundered but never owned. You're erasing who I was, she said. I'm giving you the armor to become who you need to be. He closed the distance between them, his presence solid, immovable. The question is whether you're ready to stop hiding. Kiana looked down at her borrowed dress, then at the clothes that represented a life she'd never imagined. Not a maid, not invisible, something else entirely. And if I refuse? Taehyun's smile was cold and knowing. Then you'll bleed again, and next time I might not be the one who cleanses your wounds. Kiana was wearing emerald silk when the elevator chimed. She froze in the living room, coffee cup halfway to her lips. Taehyun looked up from his laptop, his expression shifting from concentration to calculation in the space of a heartbeat. My brother, he said quietly. Not a question. He'd been expecting this. The elevator required a key. Ji-Hoon had one. Kiana's hands started to shake. The coffee sloshed against porcelain. I should. Stay exactly where you are. Taehyun stood, buttoning his shirt cuffs with deliberate precision. You hide, he wins. You run, he knows I'm protecting something he broke. He'll recognize me. Yes, his eyes locked on hers. And you'll let him? The elevator doors opened. Park Ji-Hoon stepped into the penthouse like he owned it. Designer sneakers, distressed jeans, a leather jacket that cost more than Kiana used to make in 6 months. Handsome, in the careless way of men who'd never been told no. His smile died when he saw her. Recognition flashed across his face. Shock, then confusion, then something ugly and dangerous. His gaze moved from her face to the silk shirt, to the way she stood in his brother's living room like she belonged there. What the fuck? Ji-Hoon said slowly. Is she doing here? Tae-hyun moved between them, subtle but deliberate. Her name is Kiana, use it. That's the maid. Ji-Hoon's voice rose, disbelief sharpening to anger. The one I told you about, the one who saw something she shouldn't have. Yes, I remember. Tae-hyun's tone could have frozen fire. Sit down, Ji-Hoon. Are you insane? She's a witness, a liability. His eyes narrowed, understanding dawning. You've had her here this whole time, since I called, since I told you she was nobody. She's not nobody, Tae-hyun said. She's evidence. The words landed like a verdict. Kiana forced herself to breathe, to stand still even as every instinct screamed to run. Ji-Hoon's gaze burned into her. The same eyes that had been full of rage when his fists connected with her face. Evidence of what? Ji-Hoon's hands clenched. I was protecting our operation. She saw the shipment. What was I supposed to do? Not leave her alive to end up on my doorstep. Tae-hyun stepped closer to his brother, voice dropping. You created a problem. I'm solving it. By keeping her as a pet? Ji-Hoon laughed, sharp and bitter. Look at her, You dressed her up, put her in silk. What, you think that changes what she is? Kiana's jaw tightened. She set down her coffee cup with deliberate care, meeting Ji-Hoon's eyes for the first time since he'd entered. I know what I saw, she said quietly. Ji-Hoon moved toward her. Tae-hyun's hand shot out, gripping his brother's shoulder hard enough to stop him mid-step. Touch her, Tae-hyun said, and we'll have a different conversation. The kind that ends with consequences you won't recover from. Brothers stared at each other. The air crackled with violence held in check by blood and hierarchy. You're choosing her over me? Ji-Hoon's voice cracked. I'm choosing control over chaos. Ji-Hoon left with a final look that promised retribution. The elevator doors closed on his rage, leaving silence thick enough to choke on. Kiana's legs gave out. She sank onto the sofa, adrenaline draining away in waves that left her trembling. Tae-hyun poured whiskey. Brought it to her without a word. He'll come back, she said. Yes. He sat beside her, close enough that she felt the heat of him. Which is why you're going to tell me everything you saw that night. No more pieces, no more half-truths. Kiana drank, buying time she didn't have. The whiskey burned down to where fear lived. It wasn't just a shipment, she said finally. Tae-hyun went very still. The kind of stillness that preceded irreversible decisions. Explain. She closed her eyes, seeing it again. The wrong hallway. The wrong door left ajar. The voices that had made her freeze instead of run. I was bringing towels to the guest wing. Your brother was in the study with two men I didn't recognize. They were speaking English. Thought no one would understand. She opened her eyes, met his gaze. They were negotiating territory. Your territory. Name said, voice like razors. Lee Min-ho. And someone called Takeshi. The glass in Tae-hyun's hand cracked. Whiskey dripped between his fingers, but he didn't move, didn't flinch. His eyes had gone dark and distant, calculating a dozen futures at once. Lee runs the eastern ports, he said softly. Takeshi is Yakuza. Tokyo's new ambassador. He set down the broken glass with surgical care, and my brother was meeting them without my knowledge. He was selling access, Kiana continued, the words coming faster now, to your shipping routes, your contacts. He offered them 30% if they helped him. She stopped. Helped him what? The question hung between them, heavy with implications that could shatter families and empires. Remove you, Kiana whispered. He said you were too cautious, that the organization needed someone willing to take risks, to expand aggressively. He called you. She hesitated. Say it. Soft. He called you soft for following your father's old rules. Tae-hyun stood, moved to the window. Seoul glittered below, indifferent to the violence being planned in its towers. His reflection in the glass showed nothing. No rage, no betrayal. Just the iron strategist processing information. When I walked past, Kiana said, they saw me. Ji-Hoon followed me to the service hall. Asked what I'd heard. I lied. Said I didn't speak English well. Her hand touched her temple, where the butterfly bandage still covered his brother's violence. He didn't believe me. So he beat you to ensure your silence, and to send a message, that witnesses to his ambition were disposable. Tae-hyun turned from the window. In the low light, he looked carved from stone, beautiful, cold, absolutely lethal. You didn't come to my door bleeding because you needed protection, he said. You came because you chose a side in a war you didn't start. Kiana nodded. I chose the brother who doesn't solve problems with his fists. No. His smile was winter itself. I solved them with something far more permanent. The elders came at dawn. Kiana heard them before she saw them, the elevator ascending, multiple sets of footsteps crossing marble with the weight of men accustomed to deference. She emerged from the guest room to find Tae-hyun already dressed, standing in the center of his living room like a general awaiting siege. Stay visible, he said without looking at her. They need to see what they're demanding. 3 men entered. Old blood, old money, old violence wrapped in custom suits. They moved through Tae-hyun's space with the presumption of those who'd known him since childhood, who'd watched his father build this empire from bodies and ambition. The eldest, Park Sung-min, his uncle, stopped when he saw Kiana. His gaze swept over her silk shirt, her healing bruises, her presence in his nephew's sanctuary. So it's true, Sung-min said, you're harboring your brother's loose end. I'm protecting a witness, Tae-hyun corrected. To what? Another elder stepped forward, Kim Jae-sun, the family's consigliere. Ji-hoon made a mistake, he's young, reckless. But family, Tae-hyun interrupted, his voice cutting clean, tried to stage a coup, using my own infrastructure. The silence that followed was absolute. Sung-min's expression hardened. Be very careful with accusations, nephew. I'm not accusing, I'm stating fact. Tae-hyun gestured to Kiana. She heard Ji-hoon negotiating with Lee Min-ho and a Yakuza lieutenant, offering them my territory in exchange for backing his takeover. The word of a maid, Jae-sun dismissed. Against your own blood. The word of a witness, Tae-hyun said, who came to me bleeding because my blood wanted her silent. Sung-min moved closer, his presence carrying decades of authority. You've put us in an impossible position. The boys, your brother included, are already talking. They say you've gone soft, that you're choosing a woman over family unity. He paused. Hand her over. Let Ji-hoon handle his own mess. We smooth this over internally. No, the word landed like a gunshot. Tae-hyun. You want unity? Tae-hyun's voice dropped, deadly calm. Then you deal with the fact that Ji-hoon committed treason. Not against me, against everything my father built. He took a step forward. She stays, under my protection. And if anyone, family included, touches her, they answer to me. You're willing to fracture this organization over a maid? Jae-sun's disbelief was palpable. I'm willing to fracture it over principle. Tae-hyun turned to Kiana, extended his hand. She took it, feeling the weight of the gesture. Public, deliberate, a declaration. My father taught me that power without control is chaos. Ji-hoon represents chaos. She represents the truth that keeps chaos in check. Sung-min shook his head slowly. You're making enemies, nephew. No. Tae-hyun's fingers tightened around Kiana's. I'm drawing a line. Cross it, and discover what happens when the iron strategist stops being patient. The elders left with warnings that felt like prophecies. Kiana stood beside Tae-hyun, their hands still joined, watching Seoul wake beneath them. You just declared war on your own family, she said quietly. Yes. He didn't let go. And you're the reason I'll win it. The warehouse district was silent at 3 in the morning. Concrete and shadows, the kind of place where Seoul's underbelly conducted business the daylight world would never acknowledge. Kiana stood beside Tae-hyun in the back of his car, watching figures move through the darkness. His men, positioned with military precision around a building that had seen decades of the Park family's irreversible decisions. You don't have to watch, Tae-hyun said. Yes, Kiana replied, I do. Inside, Ji-hoon knelt on cold concrete, hands zip-tied behind his back. The confidence had been stripped away, leaving only the fear of a man who'd finally met consequences. Blood trickled from his split lip. His own men had delivered him, and the choosing survival over loyalty to a traitor. The elders stood in a semicircle, witnesses, judges, the old guard watching the new order take shape. Tae-hyun entered with Kiana at his side, not behind him, beside him. Ji-hoon's eyes went wide. You brought her, to watch you. What, kill your own brother? I brought the woman whose testimony sealed your fate. Tae-hyun's voice echoed off concrete walls. And no, I'm not killing you, that would be chaos. He crouched before his brother, eye level. I'm exiling you, stripping your name, your access, your claim to this family. You'll leave Korea tonight, live quietly in whatever hole accepts you, and if you ever return, you're sentencing me to nothing, Ji-hoon spat. I'm dead without the family, you know it. Then you should have thought of that before you sold me to our enemies. Tae-yeon stood, addressed the elders. My brother betrayed not just me but the organization my father built with blood and strategy. The evidence is irrefutable. The witness, he gestured to Kiana, is under my permanent protection. Anyone who questions this questions my leadership. Sungmin stepped forward, his face carved with resignation. You've made your choice, Tae-yeon. The family will accept it. But understand, mercy has a cost. This isn't mercy, Tae-yeon said quietly. This is justice that serves the organization's stability. My brother lives because his death would create martyrs. His exile creates a lesson. He turned to Ji-Hoon one last time. You called me soft, but I'm giving you what you never gave her, a chance to survive your own mistakes. Ji-Hoon looked at Kiana, hatred and something else, maybe understanding, flickering across his face. You won, he said bitterly. The maid who became the boss's queen. No, Kiana said, her voice steady. The woman who refused to be erased. They left him there, broken but breathing. Justice without blood, control without chaos. In the car, Tae-yeon took her hand again. The gesture had become familiar, protection that felt like partnership. You could have stayed at the penthouse, he said. I needed to see it end. Kiana looked at him, this man who'd cleaned her wounds and declared war for her truth. All of it. It's not ended. You understand that? His thumb traced across her knuckles. You're part of this world now, permanently. I know, she squeezed back. I chose to be. Seoul's light spread before them, a city that belonged to survivors, strategists, and those brave enough to bleed on the right doorstep.